1954, London, Kensington, a Saturday afternoon. James comes to the door, exactly on time, not 1 minute late. He has flowers, nothing extravagant, a modest bunch from the florist on the corner. Vivienne's mother opens the door. James steps inside, removes his hat, sits down. Vivienne is still getting ready, 5 more minutes. James waits. He doesn't complain. He has no telephone in his hand. He simply waits. And in those 5 minutes, the look Vivienne's mother gives James, that measuring, assessing, quiet look, determines everything. A man who doesn't receive that look's approval doesn't come to the door a second time. A man who does has just taken his first step into Vivienne's life. Vivienne knows this. James knows this. Everyone knows this. The courtship rituals of that era had 10 unwritten rules that nobody ever named, but everyone understood. And these rules weren't simply about manners. They protected something that modern romance has tried to sell and never quite managed to deliver. Clarity, direction, the knowledge of where things are going. This video is about those 10 rules, and when you hear one of them, you'll find yourself thinking, why has nobody ever said this to me before? Let's begin. But before we do, I need to say something. This video is not here to romanticize the 1950s. For women of that era, marriage was often an economic necessity. Options were severely limited. In Britain, women couldn't open an independent bank account without a husband's signature until 1975. Divorce carried a social stigma that could follow a woman for the rest of her life. I'm not setting any of that aside, but here, within exactly those constraints, something interesting was present that we no longer have. A framework. Quiet, unspoken, but universally understood. A system that determined what was acceptable, what wasn't, where a relationship was heading, never debated, never questioned, never named. And that system gave Vivienne something that the modern dating industry has spent billions trying to replicate. Clarity, direction, trust. Now, let's step into Vivienne's Kensington sitting room. Rule 1. Courtship had a name and a beginning. 1954, Kensington. A Tuesday evening. Vivienne is returning from a tea invitation at the neighbours'. James was there too. They talked lightly, politely, briefly, but on his way home, James turned to Vivienne's father. Mr. Hartley, with your permission, I'd like to invite Vivienne to the cinema on Sunday. This sounds excessively formal to us today, but in that era, this sentence was doing something very important. It was making everything clear. James was openly declaring his interest. Vivienne's family was responding. Vivienne's right to accept or decline was explicit. There was no ambiguity. No, I wonder what he's thinking. No, how should I interpret this? Courtship had begun. Or it hadn't. Either way, it was clear. When I was researching this, I kept thinking about the word situationship. It's a word that has emerged precisely in the absence of this kind of clarity. Two people, neither of them sure what they are, neither of them daring to ask. In Vivienne's world, the ambiguity was structurally impossible, because the beginning had a name. Rule 2. The first meeting began at the door. James arrived on Sunday at exactly 2 o'clock. He had brought flowers, modest, appropriate. He came inside, he sat down and spent 5 minutes talking with Vivienne's mother. Vivienne came down the stairs. Then they left. This seems excessively formal by today's standards, but there was a reason the first meeting began inside the house. Vivienne's family saw James. James's family would see Vivienne. The relationship developed within the knowledge of both families. This wasn't simply a control mechanism, or not only that, it was a guarantee. Vivienne wasn't meeting a stranger, she was meeting someone who had been seen, known, and assessed by the people who cared most about her. Today we meet complete strangers from dating applications. Nobody knows anyone. Safety has become entirely the individual's responsibility, and that responsibility is frequently exhausting. Vivienne's system shared that responsibility. The weight was lighter because more people were carrying it. Rule 3. The hours were agreed. James told Vivienne what time the film began, what time it ended, what time he would bring her home. And he brought her home at that time. Not 1 minute passed. If he had said 6 o'clock, he was at the door at 6. This sounds restrictive by today's standards, but having a clear time did something very important. Vivienne's family knew where she was. They knew when she'd be back. And James keeping that small daily word, that minor unremarkable commitment, was telling Vivienne something about something larger. Would bigger promises be kept? Vivienne wasn't consciously thinking about this. James was simply always at the door at 6, and that consistency over time was building something. I remembered something my grandmother once told me while I was researching this. If you want to know whether a man keeps his word, she said, watch the small things. The large things always look after themselves. The small things show character. Vivienne's system made those small things visible. Rule 4. Correspondence was an art. James proposed the second meeting not by telephone but by letter, handwritten, neatly composed, brief, sent to Vivienne's home address, and Vivienne wrote back, by hand, brief, courteous. This seems absurd to us today. Why a letter? Why something that would take days? But those letters were doing something very important. Writing meant thinking. It wasn't an impulsive message. It wasn't something sent at midnight and regretted by morning. When pen touched paper, words were chosen, thought about, weighed. And Vivienne's reply was written in exactly the same way, considered, measured. This exchange between two people, slow as it was building something solid. What is lost in the speed of instant messaging, the time to think, was present in those letters. Vivienne's grandmother kept her letters for decades because each one contained time and thought. Rule 5, family was at the center of everything. After the third meeting, James invited Vivienne's family to dinner. Not just Vivienne, her family. This sounds revolutionary by today's standards, but in that era it was entirely normal. Courtship wasn't only between two people, it was between two families. James's family saw Vivienne, Vivienne's family saw James, and that seeing, the conversations around that dinner table, the dynamics of the evening, everything was generating information. How did James speak with his family? Was he respectful toward his mother? Was he honest with his father? How did he behave at the table? Vivienne wasn't consciously evaluating any of this. She was simply seeing James alongside his family, and that view told her a great deal. Today, introducing a partner to the family takes months, is treated as a major milestone, has become a source of significant anxiety, because the family no longer shapes the relationship from the beginning, they simply witness it. In Vivienne's system, family was involved from the start, and that involvement created a layer of protection around the relationship. Rule 6. Gestures were measured but meaningful. On the fourth meeting, James brought flowers again, from the same florist. The same modest bunch. Vivienne remembered this afterwards, not the size of the flowers, the consistency. In the British courtship rituals of that era, gestures were measured. Making a very large gesture too soon, expensive gifts, extravagant romantic behavior was actually a poor sign. Inconsistency, imbalance, perhaps an attempt to conceal something. Small but consistent gestures said something entirely different. I thought of something my grandmother told me while I was researching this. Before you marry, she had said, choose someone who isn't trying to impress you, because someone who is trying to impress you will one day stop making the effort. Vivienne's system produced this measured quality naturally because everyone was operating within the same rules. There was no competition, no performance, just consistent, measured, considered behavior. Rule 7. Feelings opened slowly. Vivienne had been seeing James for 6 weeks. Had they said, I love you yet? No. This seems slow to us today. Why wait so long? But in that era, the slow opening of feelings was entirely deliberate. Over 6 weeks, Vivienne had seen James in different settings, alongside her family, alone, with friends, in a difficult moment, in a happy one. In every setting, James was the same person, consistent. And that consistency, that slow 6-week opening, was giving Vivienne something. Not a feeling, but a foundation, the ground on which something could be built. Today's dating culture rewards speed, sharing everything on the first meeting, attaching quickly, declaring us quickly. But speed frequently skips the foundation entirely. Vivienne never lost the foundation, because her system built the ground first and everything else afterwards. Rule 8. Making a promise was a real commitment. 2 months in, James told Vivienne clearly that he wished to court her, that is, that he was carrying a serious intention. This was not the equivalent of today's "will you be my girlfriend?" It was considerably more. When he said courting, James was saying the direction of this relationship is marriage. I am here for that reason, and during this time I will not look at another woman. And when Vivienne said yes, she was making the same commitment. The ambiguity ended, the in-between ended, the question of where are we ended. Two people were walking in the same direction, both of them knew it. When I was researching this, I thought about the conversation we now call the exclusivity talk. Were we official? People ask. The conversation itself has become a source of anxiety. In Vivienne's system, this conversation was clear from the very beginning, because the word courting contained everything within it. Rule 9. Courtesy was a habit, not a performance. James opened the door for Vivienne at every meeting. Every single one. This seems like a small detail today, but for Vivienne it wasn't small at all, because the gesture was repeated every time. At the first meeting, at the 5th, at the 10th, even at the moments when the initial excitement had settled and the effort of impressing had quietly eased, and that every time was doing something very important. In that era, courtesy was not a courtship tactic, it was not a performance, because everyone was doing it, they had been raised with it, it had become habit, which meant that abandoning courtesy would have been noticed, showing it was simply being normal. Today, courtesy is presented as a gesture, something met with "how lovely of him," but the truly powerful thing is the moment courtesy becomes unremarkable, when it's expected no praise, when it simply happened. James opening the door was a gesture at the first meeting. By the 10th meeting, it was no longer a gesture, it was simply what he did. Vivienne felt the difference. Rule 10. Intention was always visible, and this one is the most important. Vivienne never once had to ask, "Where is this going?" because the system itself answered that question at every step. When James came to the door, interest. When he met her family, seriousness. When he said courting, intention. When he proposed, decision. Every step had a name, every step told you what the next one was. Vivienne didn't need to ask for a map because the map already existed. Today we have invented the word ghosting. We have invented the word breadcrumbing. We have invented the word situationship. The very existence of these words tells us something. People no longer know where they are. Where was Vivienne? She always knew, because in that system, everything had a name, and the things that have names don't disappear quietly. Look at these 10 rules again. Not one of them was really about courtship etiquette. Each one was a mechanism for clarity, a system that made everything visible, the intention, the direction, the pace, the boundaries between two people. Vivienne wasn't consciously applying this system. Her mother had taught her, her mother's mother had lived by it, everyone did, and that system gave Vivienne something, the ability to be completely present in her relationship, without wondering where things were going, without calculating whether she was showing enough interest, without anxiously asking whether she was truly wanted, simply being there. Working through this research, I found myself pausing again and again and thinking, perhaps the problem is not our choices, our standards, or our luck. Perhaps the problem is that the clarity has gone, and to bring it back doesn't require an app, a therapist, or a dating coach. Just 10 rules. And the willingness to see them. This week, choose one thing from this list. Just one. Think about it for a week, then come back and write in the comments. 2 questions for you. Did your grandmother or your mother experience courtship this way? Which of these rules did they live by? And which one would you bring back this week? I read every single comment. Every one. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do. Hit the bell, and I'll find you when the next video is ready.